But he was not one to give you crayons and a coloring book. I got a set of figures to draw. So he just got me hooked at a very young age. I've had the benefit of working for some smaller firms and some larger firms, and you just get a good feel for working with different clients. I've worked with solopreneurs right through to I've worked for large clients such as Square. They do the financial processing systems. And right now we have some good small to mid-size software and medical device companies. Throughout my career, you talk a lot on your podcast about feeling like you're caged. The traditional law firm partnership model felt like a cage to me. I literally thought it was me. I tried working at a few different firms and it just never felt like a good fit. Everyone else couldn't wait to be partner. And I just thought, this just sounds awful. It really does. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this firm will be better and this firm will be better. And nothing against the firms. I think the traditional partnership model is great for some people, but it's just not for me. I had 3 children. I never had a maternity leave with any of those children. It was really not a good workplace. Was laid off during the pandemic, which ended up being the best thing that happened to me. I started my own firm with practically nothing. My 401k, because I was laid off and I didn't have an established firm, I couldn't take any clients with me. So it was definitely a long road. October of 2020, I opened the firm with my dad. My significant other has a background in business. So I was able to lean on him for help with, how to run a business and cash flow and all that. And I was bound and determined. I kind of had a guidebook of what not to do because I had worked in so many places. I knew I didn't want to do that. Most law firms, you get 20 to 30% of what you bill, really fancy office, really expensive overhead. I'd rather work from home, I've had commutes that were 4 to 7 hours a day, round trip. It was just crazy. As my parents both turned 81 this year. One of the last positions I found, they said, you'll be able to work from home whenever you want. I thought, oh, great. That ended up not being the case. So needless to say, my dad said, well, start a fully virtual firm. Like, can you even do that? You must have to have a home. Every law firm I've ever worked at, even the ones that claim to be virtual, you have people working from home, but there's a base, someone's opening the mail and answering the phones and doing all that stuff. And the logistics of figuring that out were very challenging. It took me probably 8 months to really get everything ironed out in terms of having the proper IT support in place. Ultimately, I ended up outsourcing a lot of things, bookkeeping, payroll, IT support, found a co-working space to manage my mail for me, all that, they even deposit checks for me. So we are truly 100% virtual. Everyone works from home, and it's been so freeing. It was a little frustrating at one point in time. I said to my significant other, I never got to find that good boss that was like supportive and family comes first and we're a team. And, and he said, yeah, but you get to be that boss. And that's so much better. I'm like, that is, it is much better. So I know we're spinning way away from patents, but it's just kind of disrupting that traditional partnership model has been so rewarding. And I honestly wasn't sure if anyone else would want to be a part of this. I mean, most law firms have that, you're on partnership track and, this is your salary and you have this many hours and the expectations are just crazy. And what we do is already pretty challenging technically, and it's high stress. We don't need to add stress on top of that. So my model as of now is I'm 100% owner. Everyone else it's kind of just like one big team, one big happy family. We all work from home. We have weekly meetings, and every person that I've worked with have said, this is so nice. Like, it's so great. It's so rewarding having a good boss that cares about me. And it's just amazing. And I don't care where people work or when they work. Just tell me when you're not going to be available. That's my only requirement. And I just think that, it'd be nice if more law firms were like that.
So, I mean, with that being said, right, like if you could time travel back and then go back to say in the last 20, 30 years, if there's a point that you could think that was a fork in the road that you would want to go back and change anything, first of all, when would you go back and what would you change?
It's a good one. I would say, I don't know, I wouldn't change anything. That's probably not the answer you're hoping for, but I I'm very happy with all of, even the bad times. I'm not sure if I would have really been able to be a good boss. I've seen so many. I wish I could go back and not have had to gone through all of the bad experiences that I went through, but I don't think that I would change it because it definitely has helped me to become much more empathetic, much more patient, just much more compassionate with people and much more understanding, and just given me that strength and that backbone to do this. And I think I'm at the right point in my career where my kids are a little older. So,
Very cool. So, I mean,
yeah.
you brought up a thing earlier. You mentioned you have kids, and then you were saying that when you would go to your dad's job, that he wasn't the dad that would give you coloring books and pencils. But the irony is that, when you're talking about patents, there is a lot of creativity when it comes down to like the patent drawings. Like they're a particular style. You just can't throw something together. There's a particular learning curve to that. So like just talk about it a little bit. Like what like why are patents designed the way they are, and how does that really work when you're filing for a patent?
Great question. So, patent drawings are really meant to convey to someone having the same skill level as, the patent applicant, your invention and how they would be able to build it themselves. So let's say, you have, I like to use the chair example just because everyone knows what a chair is.
Mm,
You would want to have all of the different views of it so that someone else could put the chair together.
mm,
So you can't just show a view of the front. You want to show the front and the back and both sides and the top and the bottom, and maybe a picture of all of the pieces taken apart, and if there are any special fasteners or screws or things like that, all that needs to be shown. The most challenging thing, to be honest with you, is that the patent office is a little behind the times.
mm,
So all of the drawings as of now need to be, for the most part, need to be two-dimensional drawings.
mm.
So sometimes that can be a little bit challenging when you're trying to show complex three-dimensional systems. So it's funny that you mentioned that. I really didn't realize how much I've learned just about drawings over the years, but yeah, there is a lot to it. The best thing you can do, and that I've found to be invaluable, is having a good draftsman. There are a lot of people that actually specialize in this and they just do drawings for patents.
Mm.
Some of the simpler things, if it's an app for like an app on your phone, that's probably just going to be some flow charts and some screenshots, probably nothing too complicated to it. But if it's a complicated medical device with all these components, then I typically involve a draftsman because there are all kinds of crazy rules about shading and cross sections and things like that. If you show a cross section, you have to have it marked a certain way and all that. So these are the kind of nuances that, if you're filing a provisional patent yourself, those really aren't examined, so you're fine. But once you get to that non-provisional stage, it's so easy to make a simple mistake with a drawing, for example, and you can't change that. You can't go back and fix it.
Mm. And
So,
I would think the skill level of the designers or the people that are drawing them, I would say they're relative to architects, right? I mean, they have
oh,
like a similar lingo, similar line structures. I mean, kind of like when I see your logo, first of all, I love your logo, right? And I can
thank
see
you.
how your logo was multiple different things. I mean, you have the virtual aspect to it, you have the interconnecting world, global, you have the actual lines from the patents, and at the same time, you have like this whole bringing the pieces together. So, like, let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how did you come up with that logo? Like, who helped you design that logo?
Yes. So I used a company. Oh my goodness, the name's escaping me. They're based out of the UK. I'll have to follow up with you. They were phenomenal. They basically worked with me and asked a lot of questions. I think, which, when you're working with any service-based interest industry, I think you want them to be asking you a lot of questions. And I had this vision of basically everything you just described of, being interconnected and this virtual earth and, bringing all the pieces together. And I'm glad you said that because I've only had this once. Someone said, it looks like the world's falling apart. And I said, oh no,
Together.
it's meant to be coming together.
Yeah,
So just keeping things to get connected. And I'm hoping it conveys also kind of like high tech,
it does.
a little bit.
Definitely does.
Good, good.
It
Glad
does.
to
I mean,
hear
well,
it.
you got the big blue color, so I mean, by default, anyone that knows anything about big blue, they'll see the IBM blue, and it'll be relative by default. So definitely. So I mean, let's just talk about like your day to day. I mean, obviously, you're talking about you have kids, you have a family, you have a significant other, you still have your dad. So what does your morning habits, your morning routines look like?
So every morning I start with yoga and some morning affirmations, which have actually been far more helpful than I would have expected. So just some, I'm strong and healthy. I'm capable of doing this. Just repeating those to myself as I do my yoga.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing is, have you ever read the book Atomic Habits?
Oh yeah, it's one of my
So,
favorites.
oh my gosh, I love so habit stacking. I'm trying to be better about stacking my habits together. So the big one for me is just getting, if I don't have that yoga and those affirmations, my whole day is just thrown off. Then I have my greens and some coffee and hit the road. Each day is a little different. It depends. I typically try to do block scheduling. And day scheduling. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, I try to keep for my networking meetings. I believe you're also a member of Success Champion Networking.
Yes,
You're going to be a speaker, I see, at the summit.
yes, I will.
Um, yes. So I'm just started a chapter in New Hampshire with Steve Wallace. So that's part of my Tuesday routine is have my SCN meetings. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I usually keep open for client meetings. And I have learned as I've been growing really quickly to keep more free time, quote unquote free, on my calendar because things always pop up that are unexpected. It seems like that's just part of being a business owner in general, is unexpected things just happen. And I think if you don't have the time built in for that, things can just like spiral out of control. So that's been one thing that's been really helpful for me.
So I think, based upon what you just said, I mean, you alluded to like my next question about like books, and I mean, habit stacking is one of the things. And if anybody that doesn't understand what habit stacking is, essentially it's planning out your day, and essentially you have a roadmap to kind of stack these habits so it becomes routine to where you stop thinking about it, and then you get more effective day to day every single day. So I want you to talk about like what other books kind of helped you on your journey to get you to where you are.
So it's hard to pick a couple. That one's been definitely a good one. The other one, I don't know if I can say this, but it's On Yourself
Yeah,
by, have you ever read that book?
yeah, yeah,
So it is Gary John
yeah.
Bishop.
I think he was
It is,
Irish, right? Is he Irish or
yes.
Scottish? Yeah, yeah.
That book, I've actually read it twice. It was very good for me to just kind of get rid of that head trash and that thinking about I can't do this and especially as a business owner, um, your failures, you can kind of make them out to be such a big deal. Like, oh, how could I possibly do this? This is horrible. And I've learned to, if I wouldn't talk to a stranger that way, I shouldn't be talking to myself that way. So if a stranger were to make that kind of mistake, would you ever say to them, "You're such an idiot. How could you possibly do that?" Or even maybe a little kid, if a stranger doesn't work. And so that's really been helpful for me to just be kinder to myself. And, if I make a mistake, own it, fix it, and move on. Don't wallow in my pity of, oh no, how could I make this big mistake? It's okay. I made a mistake and I'm going to move on.
Very cool. Very cool.
So
So let's fast forward a little bit. I mean, obviously you have, and I think you've proven it time and time again on this episode, like your information on patents and trademarks are abundant, right? Have you had opportunity, or are you at least thinking about maybe creating your own book as well?
I have thought about it. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of information out there. I'm not quite sure how to spin that. There's a lot of information about how to patent it,
Hmm.
how to trademark it. I've thought about making a book about how not to, because
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of mistakes. So I think that maybe would be a good option.
Yeah. If I could give you a little words of insight, I would say,
Please.
and I tell this all the time because from a growth strategy standpoint, there's close to 8 billion people on this planet, right? And in your lifetime, let's say you've met 800,000 of these people, right? And out of the 800,000 people, maybe there's 10% of those people that actually may do business with you. They may become your friends. They may like you. So I think you're doing the world a disservice by not writing that book, because your audience, your community of people, they want to hear from you. And until you do it, they're still going to be struggling, walking around in circles, trying to figure out the answers that you already have, but you're not giving it to them.
I love that. I'll
Something
definitely
for
have
you,
to give that some thought.
something for you to think about. So, with that, let's talk about time frame, right? So, like, what do you see yourself? And I kind of just put that deadline for that book in there. But where do you see yourself 20 years from now?
Good question. Hopefully, managing a firm of, I'll say 20 attorneys. Honestly, my number one goal is to be able to get the firm big enough that I can provide some pro bono services to startups and small businesses. I actually recently helped a friend of mine who was stuck in a non-solicitation, non-compete
Mm,
with a former employer. And some of those, they're not enforceable and they're ridiculously overbroad,
mm,
but it costs the small business, it can literally put a small business out of business
mm.
just trying to defend something like that, even if it's overly broad. So that's really my goal of long term, is to have a sustaining firm and be able to provide those pro bono services to startups so that they don't go out of business, trying to defend their business.
So,
So,
on the pro bono, are you planning on starting like another division, like a nonprofit side of things?
yeah, I think eventually
Mm,
that would be nice to kind of spin that off.
very cool.
Um, yeah, do some good.
So, talking about like doing things, I mean, obviously on a day-to-day basis, there's systems in place, there's websites, there's probably tools. What software do you use on a day-to-day basis that you would not be able to do what you do if you didn't have access to it?
So there are two systems that are integrated together. One is just your regular Microsoft Office suite.
Hmm.
So we take advantage of Outlook and Teams and all that. And the other one is Datto Workplace,
Hmm.
which is a cloud-based data management system. And so it allows all of our attorneys working from all the different locations to have access to the same files.
Wow.
And it's really nice for confidentiality purposes. Sometimes there are certain files that only certain people can see.
Hmm.
When you're a physical space, it's sometimes hard to separate that. All I have to do is uncheck a box, and then that person can no longer see the file. So both of those have been really helpful for me.
Really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, you've been in this space. Again, your dad brought you up in here. You have an engineering tech background. Who is your ideal avatar? Like, who's the ideal customer? And obviously, it could be a wide gambit, but if you had to work with someone, who would that person be?
I would say a startup to small size software development company. The software development companies have a lot of IP needs that they're not aware of, whether it's patents, license agreements, non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements. I have one software development company that they write software for the larger clients like iRobot and Amazon and things like that. And the larger clients like Amazon have their own agreements that my client has to sign. But for some of the other clients, let's say you go to them and say, hey, develop an app for me.
Mhm.
Now, what if they develop something patentable through the course of that? Do you own it? Do they own it?
Mhm.
That needs to be laid out clearly.
Mhm.
And a lot of software development companies don't have that in place. There's kind of this, I want everyone to be able to use my idea mentality in the software space, which I love. It's great, the sharing, but okay, do you want Microsoft to have that idea and be able to sue you for using it? Well, no, I don't want that. Okay, then let's protect it. So trying to avoid the worst case scenario.
I mean, I'm just listening to you, and I mean, you said that so quickly, and I don't think you realize it. I think that was the outline for your book right there. Like literally those bits of nuggets. And to your point, I think most startup and founders they don't even think about that, especially in that space of realm. So just a hint back to that book again. But let's talk about final words of wisdom. So let's say you're talking to this startup founder, right? And he's creating software, he's developing stuff, he's thinking about SaaS, he's thinking about renewable revenue, he's thinking about scaling. What words of wisdom would you tell him to make sure that he doesn't make a mistake by not filing that patent before he makes it into the mainstream?
Mhm. So the number one, which we touched on a little bit, is to just make sure you have that patent before you disclose it, because you don't want someone else to make money off of all of that, R&D and or research and development that you've put into that product. And make sure that you have license agreements in place. If you are licensing, if you have SaaS, software as a service, make sure you have a license agreement in place. And that's another reason to have a patent, is so that you have the patent to back up the licensing. And it can also, sometimes when you're a business owner, you get kind of pigeonholed into, this is what I want my product to do. Our job as a patent attorney is to expand that into, okay, but maybe this idea could be used for all of these other avenues, and it can be licensed in those areas. And so we can kind of broaden things out that way. So definitely talk to a patent attorney as soon as you can, because even if I can't help you now, I will still take the time to talk to you and say, hey, make sure you touch base with me before you do this, or let me follow up with you in 6 months, things like that.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, how do they find you? I mean, do you prefer them find you on your website, social media? How can someone get in contact with you?
Sure. Typically, the best way is right on my website. It's virtualipllc.com. And you can get my email addresses on there, as well as right on the homepage, there's a link to schedule a 15-minute consultation.
Hmm.
And that's generally the best bet to get
Very
in
cool.
touch.
Very cool. So then now we're going into the bonus round, and I love the bonus round because like now you can kind of relax. I think we've given so much data, so much value on IPs. So my next question is, if you could spend 24 hours with anyone, right, uninterrupted for those 24 hours, that person could be dead or alive. Who would it be and why?
Hmm, that's a tough one. I'm going to say, this is probably cheesy, but it's okay. I'm going to say my grandmother, because she passed away she lived with us for many years, and she passed away when I was a teenager. And it would be great for her. I would just love for her to see what I've done.
Hmm.
and to be able to spend that time with her because I just didn't know her as an adult. It would be really awesome to know her as being an adult myself.
Hmm.
Um,
So let's,
yeah.
let's continue down that road. So I mean, if you could present to your grandmother and tell her, okay, my most significant achievement to date is, what would that be?
I would say giving other attorneys a better place to work
Mm,
and a more positive work environment. Um, it's been very, very rewarding. I actually got an email just yesterday from one of my attorneys, as well as inspiring other people. I got a LinkedIn note this morning from another attorney, and I've even when I think I'm failing, like someone else is looking up to me, and I just love that. She's like, "You really inspire me. I was having a tough week, but I'm really able to keep going because you're such an inspiration." It's like I'm inspiring other people. It's just
hmm.
like I wish I could show her that message. It's pretty cool. It's very surreal reaching this. Not that I'm like famous by any
Yeah, yeah.
means, but just reaching that level of being able to help other people. I love that.
So that leads me to, if money wasn't a factor, would you still be doing what you're doing right now?
Yes, I love what I'm doing.
Mm,
I
Very,
I love it.
very, very cool. So going into closing, I always like to, everyone that I'm interviewing, I like to give you to become the host of the Boss Uncaged podcast. So the Boss Uncaged show is now yours. Now you're going to interview me. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask SA?
Oh, yes. What do you think? So I was very impressed that you know about all of the trademark classifications and everything. So, what are, did anything that I say change? I mean, we talked mostly about patents, but did that change any of maybe what you already thought about intellectual property? Or, did anything that I say change either for trademarks or patents, or was that in line with what you had already thought?
No, I think, I mean, that's just one reason why I have this show is it's kind of like, I'm like a jack of all trades and I just kind of have tentacles, but you specialize in what you specialize in. So like when I ask these particular questions, I'm trying to put myself in the listener to ask those questions to get them fulfilled. And for you, it was definitely about the patents. Not only seeing like your positive energy about it, but then kind of bringing into light like the thing that we talked about earlier about the strategy, about being offensive versus defensive. And I've kind of known about it, but I didn't really knew that it was an actual legal thing. I just thought that the guys that I met were like really good hustlers and they figured out some kind of hack in the system. So when you brought that to light, it was kind of like, it makes perfect sense. If I'm going to talk to a lawyer, they need to know whether I'm going to be defensive or offensive. And you kind of clearly depicted that for me.
Awesome.
Yep. Any other questions?
I can't think of any. I wish yeah,
Cool. Well, I
cool. Thank
definitely
you.
appreciate you. I think you give so much insight to an area that I think most people are business owners, they kind of shun upon or they don't have the budget for or they kind of say, "Oh, I'll figure it out later." And what you really said, and to summarize it, is kind of like you need to figure it out before later because when later comes, you may not have anything to figure out at all at that point in time.
Exactly. That was a great way of summarizing it.
Yep, yep. Well, I definitely appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Great. S.A Grant, over and out.